Okay.
All right.
Finally, I'm recording, damn it.
Well, this is cool, man, because I like doing so much podcasting, being on other podcasts, co-host of Bad Christian, doing this Pastor with No Answers. It always feels different depending on who you're with and what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you, there is a very unique feel when I'm looking at Devin Shelton, because it's like, I don't know, you radiate calmness, and if you add your calmness to the fact that you and I are really good friends, it just puts my heart at ease a little bit. So
well, I'm glad to hear that.
So thank you.
Thank you, Joey.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, for sure. No, I was thinking, so doing this series, why do you still believe? And I thought it was just kind of a crazy thought. Like, what if I were to start this and you said, I don't? And then I'd have to be like, okay, let's talk about something else. So I actually, it is really crazy. You and I consider you one of my closest friends, but we don't get a chance to talk that often. And interestingly enough, when we do get together with all the fellas, I mean, you know, we talk family stuff, we talk sports, and I know the last time I was able to hang out with you for an extended period of time, I mean, it was right in the middle of your mom's funeral stuff and family in and out and everything, so we talked about spiritual stuff a little bit, but I honestly, I mean, I really, after all of these years, I know you're still a Christian, and I know you and I have changed a lot, but I don't know what you would pinpoint a lot of your changed beliefs to. So I do want to touch on that and ultimately get to why do you still believe. So where are you at in your faith at this point in your life? What's changed?
Well, I would say a lot has changed. I grew up, very, very conservative home, Southern, Baptist and even Pentecostal and independent and all that stuff. So grew up in very charismatic, I guess partly legalistic church for sure. Just, the emphasis being on things that I would say now are not very important. So, I mean, in that respect, my beliefs have changed dramatically from the things that matter about what women wear to church or if they're allowed to talk or if they can, if just the behavior mentality of I think I've even said this before too on an interview with you, is that I used to be so scared that I was going to mess up and I would ask forgiveness, dozens and dozens of times if I felt like I did something wrong, or I would say the blessing before I chewed a piece of bubble gum, stuff like that. So from that, I've changed drastically over the past, 15 years, probably since college. My beliefs have morphed from, how I kind of read the Bible, how I view the Bible, in several ways. And I would say a lot of that being due to the fact that I feel like the church and Christians hold up the Bible sometimes to the point of it being above Jesus even. So for instance, that's kind of bothered me over the past several years, is like, of course I respect the Bible. Of course I believe the Bible. Of course I hold it as truth. However, I think there are things in the Bible that have maybe even have changed in our culture, the way we treat women in church, the way we, maybe even the way we talk, the way we live our lives, whatever. And so that all, how you read the Bible has definitely changed for me, which you know from yourself that if you change how you read and view the Bible, that's going to change a lot of smaller beliefs within your belief system. So I would say it's morphed quite a bit based on that primarily over the past several years.
Tell me this because this is crazy thought for me. Where I'm at right now in my, and I mean Christian faith. I'm a Christian. Where I'm at in my Christian faith right now, 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, but probably 5 years ago is safe. If you described 2017 Joey's beliefs to 2012 Joey's beliefs, 2012 Joey would say, he's 2017 Joey's probably not a Christian.
You're right.
I mean, can you say the same thing? Like, and maybe not in that same measure of time, but if you go far enough back, would old Devin say, more up to date Devin's not a Christian?
Probably. I mean, probably if you go back far enough, and I feel like maybe since my early to mid 20s, I've kind of had this mentality of like, there are Christians who are stretched so much farther than me that I still am okay with them being a Christian. You know what I mean? Like, I always kind of felt like, well, I can't say who is and who isn't. That's just kind of how I always felt. I was definitely judgmental of people's behavior.
Right.
But I would say, well, I don't really know their heart. God knows their heart, whatever. But I would say if you looked at me and I could see all my beliefs laid out, I would probably be pretty skeptical of me being a Christian.
Yeah.
2017 Devin being a Christian for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I do think one thing that I do recall is I think you have a lot more open-handedness about the afterlife. If I remember correctly, the last time we did talk some spiritual stuff, I think, obviously you and I grew up with it was almost like for some reason our religious background, people just thought that they had the afterlife tagged. It's just like, we know how this is going to be, heaven and hell. We can pretty much tell you exactly what to expect, and you have a lot more open-handedness. Now, with your, one of the closest people that you've ever had in your life being your mom, how has that made you think more about the afterlife? And what does that look like with someone whose beliefs have changed as much as you, and then your actual mom is experiencing something?
Yeah, I don't think I've thought much more about the afterlife now that my mom's passed away.
Yeah.
I have thought about it in short stints, maybe more of a focal thought for a couple days or something like that. But it doesn't really bother me, about that. I mean, I still believe there's something after this life. I still believe that, I believe we'll spend eternity with God in some form, and I do believe that people maybe who don't believe or I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm not sure where the line is drawn for heaven and hell.
Yeah.
I don't really believe, like we've talked about, in the eternal torment, fire, and burning hell, really, that I used to, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me biblically anymore. But yeah, and I know my mom was one of the most godly women that I've ever known, whatever that means.
Yeah. She
was far off, I compared to me in some of her beliefs as far as like what she believed after and into the world and stuff like that. So, but my mom was great about, she was super smart. She knew the Bible backwards and forwards, but she was really open to talking about things. She never made me feel, less Christian, when I was talking to her about saying, well, I would kind of just be vocalizing my thoughts about certain things within Scripture that we talked about growing up in church, and that the things that she and my dad believed. And so it was always nice because she would allow me to kind of stretch myself a little bit, without me feeling judged by her.
Right.
So that was always kind of nice, and so that was one good thing about being able to kind of dialogue with my mom about the Bible and our beliefs and stuff too. So
yeah, it's so crazy because I feel like, how you described your mom, it's like I can personally recognize when there's going to be someone who I do share that stuff with. I can kind of know the level of writing off they're going to do in their head towards me. And it's so crazy that to think of myself being put in a category of, he's just seeking after doing things on his own, or doesn't want to be accountable to a God, or thinks that he's smarter than the Bible and all this stuff. And it's just like, that's so crazy, because these are the same sort of thoughts that I thought about certain people, and it's like, it cannot be any further from the truth. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. Like, Joey Svensson, and you know that Joey wants to serve God and whoever he is, and I do believe in the Christian God, and I think that there's probably a lot of stuff that I've been wrong in. There's probably a whole lot of stuff that I believe wrong in right now, but whoever he is and whatever Jesus wants to do in my life, like, I really and truly want that. But I find it a lot easier to not even open up, I think, with a lot of the different things that are going on in my head, because it just almost seems like there's no point to it because of the tendency of people just to write off someone. And
yeah, I totally agree.
I
totally agree with that.
And I know that from experience, because I used to do it. Like,
right.
That's the thing,
right.
is I don't look down on those people. I mean, sure, it can be frustrating, but I certainly don't look down on them. I totally understand where they're coming from. I mean, with how the church that you worked at for a while, did you open up with a lot of the differing views in your head theologically or philosophically or anything like that, or was it just not worth it?
I would say I did open up to a degree.
Yeah.
It was probably a pretty small degree. I guess you could say that there were things that came up, especially over the last couple years with controversy within our church and conflict, that people on two sides and all this stuff that happens at a lot of churches. That to me was a little bit of a doorway to kind of say, you know what, I don't think these types of actions are right because of this, and that would kind of open up new dialogue that I was able to say that maybe I wouldn't say to people before.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a lot of times those conflicts are just super silly and totally shallow. Some of them are more deep, based on actual biblical beliefs and foundations that people have that are significant to them personally, and maybe not to everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt that way. There were times that I definitely didn't know, because
right.
I was like, it's just not worth it. And when you come across there was one instance I can give you real quick where there was a lady who came up, and this was during the heightened time of when the refugees, we were shutting down the borders to some degree, and people didn't want them in. Some people did, and I remember she came up, and this was like after church or before church, and she wanted us to kind of pray with her.
Yeah.
And the reason she wanted us to pray is she said, we need to close our borders. We don't need to let any refugees in. And it's dangerous, and we have to take care of ourselves and our country. And I was just, in that moment, I could have just, probably part of me was just like, oh yeah, thanks, thanks for coming up. I'll pray, whatever. But I was just like, you know what? I don't agree with that. I can't really pray.
Right.
I can't really pray for that. And so we had a little bit of a discussion. It wasn't anything, too paramount, but she was definitely, that was just her way of thinking.
Right.
And I'll just let her know. I said, you know what, I kind of disagree with you, and I think it's okay to have varying beliefs on this, but I don't really want to pray that we don't allow refugees into our country.
Right. Yeah.
So
totally.
that's just one example to where I did open up a little bit, and there's plenty of others where I do not. I just kind of let it slide and move on.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Just kind of go through the motions. I know a guy Facebooked me one time and basically said, hey, man, will you partner up with me and other friends that I'm writing to pray against I don't know if it was a particular state that was going to vote pro-gay marriage or whatever it was, but he said, if we keep crossing this bridge, then, our country is not going to have God's favor or his blessing, and things will just fall apart. We really need to pray against this. And it was either don't respond at all or just tell him how I felt. And I basically just kept it at, hey, man, regardless of what somebody's belief is about this particular legal matter, I definitely don't think that the praying against a law being passed is any value at all. I said, I really just think that if anything, we just need to be praying for all of our relationships with God. I won't be praying how you're asking me to pray, but I'll pray over the situation.
That's like the super nice Christian pastor way to say, I totally disagree with you right now.
Right. So have you been at a place ever to where you were like, oh crap, I may be on a direction of stop believing altogether? Like, have you ever been faced with, oh man, there's so much is changing. Am I gonna be Dave Bazand or what?
Yeah, that's a good. Well, I would say this year.
Yeah,
I would say I've definitely felt that way some this year. So I quit working at the church at the end of 2016, and so I was talking to our friend Toby about this a little while back, and I said, you know what, I have like not prayed. I have not really talked to God. I have not read my Bible. I have not done all the traditional things that we try and do.
Met with your accountability partner.
To strengthen our walk, as they say. I've just felt really, really disconnected. And I felt like almost like a little bit of relief not working at the church, to where it's like, you know what, I kind of just want to take a step back from all that I've associated with God, all the stuff in the church and every Christian that I disagree with, and I've just kind of thrown that on God's shoulders to some degree, and it's just kind of made me pull back a little bit. And it makes me feel disconnected from God too a little bit, even though I kind of feel like it's a little bit more of a pure idea of God rather than just the corporate church idea. And so, however, with me not having that, always having that daily interaction with God to some degree. I mean, I still pray with my kids, and we talk about God all the time. But it feels a little different. And there's been a few times where I thought, man, am I going down a road of not believing or something else? But ultimately, I don't think that's the case. I think, like you were saying, I think our beliefs are just changing and expanding to where I don't know if that's like a never-ending expansion that where it'll always just keep floating wider and wider and wider until eventually the belief is like a different belief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm a little afraid of that. Like, I don't want to not believe in God or Jesus. I don't think I will. So sometimes I feel like I have to rein it back in just a little bit and say, you know what, I still believe in Jesus. I still believe in what he did for us, that he is our Savior and that God loves us. But I'm trying to redefine what all that means in my life and in our life. And so, I would say now is probably the prime time I've ever, maybe a time in college or something where you're just trying to figure stuff out. But now I just feel like it's a more legitimate way of thinking, like, okay, really, what do I believe, and how am I going to push forward in this?
In college it was like, I really want to have sex with this girl. Do I really believe that it's wrong?
Right, exactly. So now, I don't have sex much with my wife anyway, so that's not even a big deal. I'm just kidding. But, it's more of a, this affects my family. This affects my children. It affects my wife, my grandchildren. It affects my whole lineage to some degree of like my beliefs. Yeah. And not that I can control those, but your parents and grandparents obviously affected yours and mine. And so I just want to do what's right and believe what's right. And but there's so many people that they're so defensive of those beliefs, and they're trying to protect something that I'm not sure if we're protecting the right elements of those beliefs or not. It's just, it's like, you know how it goes. It's just your mind kind of goes around in circles and just trying to figure some stuff out. So
sure. Is there, or have you had anything happen to you, through your whole life? So basically anything that sometimes when you're really thinking this stuff through, you're like, well, I know that happened, and that's really hard to explain outside of what I believe about God. Like, have you had anything in your mind that is kind of evidence for what you believe in, like from an experiential standpoint?
Well, I mean, if someone from the outside, of Christianity were probably looking at it, they would probably disagree that it's, proof of some degree or an experience thing. But probably everything I've ever experienced of God that I know was from God, someone could probably easily tear that apart and say that's a bias. That's a confirmation bias.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Of what I already believe, and I'm already looking for those things.
Right.
So I, even though I still believe that many, and I'm trying to think of one specifically, but even though any of these things has happened to me that I'm 99.9% sure that it was God intervening or talking to me in some way, I still have a hard time, reaching that 100%. Like we've talked about in the past, is like I have a hard time just saying definitely that's what it was, because I know someone could easily tear it apart or disagree. And so, but yeah, there are things I can't think of any. I mean, maybe this sounds dumb, but I can't think of anything specifically. Nothing crazy or paramount or spiritual like that's happened to me physically to where I, anything like that. But just the feelings that I've had in certain situations or just experiences with my family or friends in some way was proof enough for me. But yeah.
So why it's a tricky or tough question to answer, but why do you still believe?
Yeah. I still believe just because I do feel God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel that He's there, and I feel that there has to be something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you just break it down to the root of creation and everything, it just seems too purposed to have nothing behind it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when I go back to the very core of religion and everything, and I assume that people who don't believe would just say once again, we're all looking for something to take hold of. We're all looking for something to believe in. And I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that's true.
Yeah.
However, just like I said, through my personal experiences and just people that I know, it just seems so obvious that they are living like Jesus. Great people who have been influences in my life. I'm like, that has to be, to me, that's evidence of God right there, that He just has, given us that ability to live a life, to love others and stuff. And so I just feel like if we didn't have that within us, that we wouldn't even attempt to be as good.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's not a clear answer at all, but that's just kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think honestly, people of faith, they need to be okay with what you just said. I don't really have a clear answer, because if we really believe in God, He is Jesus is supernatural. So we probably shouldn't be able to just describe it perfectly, contain God in sentences, like, really? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
So there probably isn't a good answer. What would be the most impactful person out of me, Matt, and Toby if one of us stopped believing? Which one would affect you the most?
Definitely you. Only because I'm pretty sure Matt and Toby are already on the edge of that. I'm just kidding. No, I mean,
how
Toby,
would that affect you? Like, seriously, one of your closest friends is just like, man, I just, we've been kind of on the same playing field for a while, just doubting everything, and I just don't believe anymore. Like, would that bother you? Like a super close friend?
Oh yeah, it definitely would. It would make me really, really consider even more the question you're asking, like, why do I still believe? And but yeah, it would affect me because you were always in college and even beyond. You're always the pastoral figure, of our friends who always checks in on us and I mean, I'm serious to some degree, not like in a cheesy way or anything like that, but you are the guy who you will ask us how we're doing,
right.
you know, and the rest of us, we just kind of joke around and, you know, we'll get to serious topics, but it never starts out that way. So,
yeah.
you're just kind of the guy that's always been encouraging in our spiritual life and in my life especially. So I think that would affect me more. I mean, it kind of be not. I'm not saying you're like my dad, but in some ways, like if my dad stopped believing in God,
yeah.
you know, after being a pastor for years and that was his whole life, that would affect me tremendously. And similarly would be my closest friends like you and
right.
some of the other guys. And so I think that would just affect me big time. And I would really have to evaluate, you know, man, why am I not seeing something, you know, that they're seeing? So I think that would be a big shot.
So here's what's so weird, and I don't know why this is, but I do think a lot of listeners probably do feel like, oh yeah, these guys are on the edge, and like, for example, Godless, the guy that we have on Bad Christian and sometimes Pastor with No Answers, I mean, he actually wrote me a very sincere email, very heartfelt, but basically was helping me along with the presumption that I am going to eventually stop believing. And he was basically encouraging me, saying, hey, it's going to be really hard and all this stuff. And it was a great email. And, you know, my response was, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to write all this, and I don't think I'm going to stop believing. And what's so crazy is as many questions as we're all asking and so many things that we're changing in, for some reason, I don't think you, Matt, Toby, myself, and obviously I can name a bunch of other people, is ever going to stop believing, but I don't know why. Like, I don't know. Like, I just talked to you, and you basically said this year you've been kind of wondering, what in the world do you believe? And maybe I'll stop believing, but there's like no doubt in my mind you're going to keep believing.
Right.
I don't know why.
No, I agree. It's similar to me in a sense of like this isn't very, I guess, not a very positive thing to say, but I think the same thing about like getting divorced from our wives. I think like there are people who will get divorced. I'm not saying they're worse people.
Right.
But for some reason, I think like me and a few of my friends, like you guys, just won't get divorced.
Right.
Not that I don't think it's possible.
Right.
Or that someone wouldn't cheat, but there's something about it. It's like, oh well, you just work through it. You just figure it out. You just keep moving. So I guess I think similarly about our belief in Jesus is that, you know, it's going to change, and I think that's good. But it doesn't mean, and maybe the boundary of what we believe is Christianity will just kind of keep kind of moving a little bit, you know, to where it's like, you know, maybe it's a lot bigger than we ever thought. We made it pretty narrow, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So, I don't know.
All right, man. Well, this has been great. Fun catching up. How about, has Megan changed much, or like has some of your questions and stuff put any sort of strain on y'all's relationship?
No strain really. And her beliefs haven't changed a whole lot, I guess you could say. It's a little different for her, I guess, because she's in the same situation in her own faith. Like she didn't work at a church. Yeah. And she didn't, you know what I mean? So like for me, it's been more of a personal battle of like, oh yeah, I just don't want to be in this anymore. And it's just a lot going on. And she's pretty steadfast when it comes to her beliefs. I mean, she's okay with us talking about stuff and thinking through stuff and everything like that, but she's pretty conservative in a sense of like, this is what she believes. She's totally fine and okay with being a little fluid on, you know, the details of beliefs and stuff like that, talking through a lot of issues. Right. And she's pretty flexible on that stuff, but overall, you know, we're going to take our kids to Sunday school for the rest of our lives, you know what I mean? So that's just kind of the way it goes, which I'm good with. You know, yeah, keeps
totally.
me grounded a little bit.
Totally. All right, well, Devin, Shelton, folks, and hey, I might as well say we just had the Unstoppable Badass on here because I hear you're a badass as well. I got to listen to that episode. Is there more than one out yet?
Yeah, I did one all by myself, which was probably the best badass episode ever, and then I did one with Toby, and I'm going to continue with Toby and just kind of help and be his co-host a little bit. Yeah, so it's fun.
Yeah, that's one podcast where I don't miss an episode. I lose track for a while, but then I go catch up. So I'll be catching up, my friend. I love you.
Thanks, buddy. Love you too.
Peace.